So, a couple days ago, I picked up this game called Yakuza 0 on the Xbox Game Pass for PC, or whatever it's actually called. Now, this game isn't new, but it's by no means old. Anyway, enough about that. Let's actually get into this insane game. So, when I first loaded this game up, I was greeted with a flashbang and an ear-piercingly loud noise. But I can forgive the game for that, because literally right after, you get to see probably one of the coolest cutscenes in any video game. Now, I'm not going to show you the whole thing because it's a few minutes long, but just go to YouTube and search it, you will not regret it. Now, I don't even think I'm like a quarter of a way through this game, but rewatching that cutscene, there's actually a lot of spoilers that when I first watched it, the first time through, you just wouldn't have realized. But I've done enough yapping, let's finally play Yakuza 0. As soon as we start the game, we are greeted by one of the main protagonists, Kiryu Kazuma, or Kazuma Kiryu. Now, to sum him up very quickly and very badly, he is a member of the Yakuza. That's really it. There's a ton of stuff with the families and whatever, but we'll maybe get into that later on. So Kiryu is in some kind of alleyway and he just beats this poor dude so that he can collect a debt for a loan shark. After getting the money, Kiryu bumps into a group of young people and they're like, hey, you can't do that, come back here, but they're all of a sudden shocked when they see his face. One of the guys puts his hand on Kiryu's shoulder and is like, hey, you gotta apologize to me, man, get on your knees, whatever. But then one of his friends is like, no, you can't do this, not this guy. So Kiryu turns around and he's got blood on his face, and the young guy's kind of like, hey, you know what, actually just don't worry about it. To which Kiryu just kind of walks away. We then meet up with the loan shark and he asks Kiryu how did it go. Kiryu tells him it's done and hands him the money. The loan shark then asks Kiryu, why don't you come work for me? It's easier than working for the Yakuza. Kiryu tells him, if you would have asked me that a couple years ago, I probably would have accepted, but once you're Yakuza, there's no turning back. So after a quick stroll through the city, a quick cleanup, and a quick check of our pager, it's time to find Nishiki. But before we do that, it's time to learn our first fighter style. After beating up those darn street hooligans, we are interrupted by none other than the man himself.
Nishiki.
So real quick summary on Nishiki. Him and Kiryu are essentially brothers. We'll get into the whole family part later on, but for now, they're brothers. Nishiki tells Kiryu we're gonna go out drinking, we're gonna stay up all night and do all kinds of things, to which Kiryu agrees to. So we get a real quick bit of information about this guy called Kazuma. It seems he's a pretty big deal, but it also looks like he's in jail, but we'll get more into that as the game goes on. But enough chit chat, it's time to go drinking. Unfortunately, before we can get to the bar, we run into a fight between a middle-aged man and a young man, to which Kiryu makes very quick work of. But once again, just before we can leave, we get stopped by an aging foreigner. He tells Kiryu to invest in himself, which pretty much just means to put points into your skill tree on the brawler style. This guy ends up being the teacher of that style. So we finally make it to the bar and we get our drinks, and we actually get a tiny little bit of backstory. He tells us that he entered the Yakuza life after chasing Kazuma. He also says that he and Nishiki were just a couple of orphans who were taken in by Kazuma, and he'd do anything to repay him, but the only thing he can do is give him his life. Nishiki says enough serious talk. Let's do some freaking karaoke, dude. So I wanted to add this part in. This is one of the many mini-games in Yakuza 0. And it starts off pretty normal, you know. You're in a room singing karaoke, you're pressing the buttons that pop up. But it gets insane really quickly. After the karaoke and the drinking, they decide to head out and go and grab something to eat. In the background there's a TV playing, and the newscaster says that last night there was a body of a young man found in a quiet corner, and the police are investigating the case as a homicide. The newscaster says that the man had multiple debts from multiple loan companies, one of them being the one we collected for. Nishiki notices and says, look, there's a murder in Kamurocho, which is where they are. Nishiki then kind of notices, wait, your job last night, you said you kind of roughed him up a bit, right? The reporter says that the body was found here, and Kiryu obviously notices that in the background, that's the place. Kiryu says that it's not like he beat the guy to death though. They then show a picture of the guy's face on the TV, to which Kiryu obviously notices and says it's him. Nishiki then goes into Kiryu, saying that it was just a collection job. Kiryu then gets a message on his pager, to which Nishiki asks him, is it HQ? To which he responds, yes, they're already calling me in. Nishiki says this is bad and you're obviously screwed, but this obviously paints a giant target on Kazuma's back. He also says that they're going to use this to bring him down, and that everybody in the Dojima family knows that Kazuma was the one who brought them both in. So that essentially means that their screw-ups are his responsibility. Kiryu obviously says that this was his fault and Kazuma had nothing to do with it. To which Nishiki responds, that's not how it works, murder is a big deal. And everyone with an eye on Kazuma's position is going to try and get it. The 3 Dojima lieutenants for starters. He heard a rumor that one of them sold him out, and a lot of people seem to think it's the lieutenant named Kuze. Kiryu says either way, he's got no choice but to call them back. So we call HQ, and the guy on the phone tells us that Lieutenant Kuze wants us to come down immediately. He then says that all 3 of the lieutenants are actually there waiting for us. So we arrive at the headquarters and we are escorted to a room where we see the 3 lieutenants waiting for us. Daisaku Kuze, Keiji Shibusawa, Hiroki Awano. Kuze says they got a call from the loan shark that we were collecting for. Awano asks us if we killed the guy that he asked us to handle, because he said that it wasn't his idea. Kuze says that none of that really matters now, what does is you making it right for murdering a civilian. Awano says that doing 7 to 8 years in jail should be good. He says that that should handle the murder business, but now that leaves us a bigger problem, which is how do we get rid of the attention at the venue or the lot. Kiryu then says, what do you mean the venue? To which Awano replies, of all the places to kill someone, why do it there? He also adds, this wouldn't have something to do with Kazuma pulling the strings, would it? Awano again says, are you telling me that it wasn't Captain's orders? Shibusawa then says, where'd you get the piece? Did he give it you? At this point, Kiryu is obviously getting annoyed and tells them, what are you talking about? I don't have a gun. Shibusawa then says that the body that they found was beat up, but it was a bullet to the face that ended him. Kiryu tells them that it wasn't him that did it, but he did beat up the guy pretty bad. Shibusawa then says, if that's true, then what you're saying is someone set you up. Kuze then says, I'm gonna ask you one more time, why did you stir up trouble there? Kiryu says that the loan shark told him that's where the guy would be, and to go and collect the money from there. Awano once again says that it doesn't change the fact that one of the boys was involved in the killing, and it's going to have repercussions on the other project. Kuze says there's only one possible answer. Kuze tells us that the place they found the body in is in a complicated spot called the empty lot, but the boss gave the 3 lieutenants orders that he wants the empty lot by any means necessary, and when the boss says he wants something, it's the lieutenant's job to make sure he gets it. But now the patch has become a murder scene, it becomes harder for them to make a move on the land. But whoever delivers it gets a pretty big prize, which is Kazuma's seat now that he's gone, which is essentially the next captain of the Dojima family. Kuze thought that it was Kazuma trying to make life harder for the lieutenants, but obviously after talking to Kiryu, that's obviously not it. Kiryu is adamant on Kazuma not having anything to do with it, and besides, he didn't kill the guy anyway. Kuze tells him to tell that to the cops, but the only problem is they're not going to listen to him because he's a Yakuza. Kuze then tells Kiryu to turn himself in by the end of the day and to leave his little finger behind. When you're a Yakuza and you say your goodbyes, you have to do it right. So it looks like the loan shark has set Kiryu up. He says he doesn't know what his game is, but they're gonna have a talk. But before we can do that, we run into the aging foreigner and his friend, and this is where we learn our second fighting style. So after learning rush style, we go to the loan shark's office. One of the guys tells us that the president has no interest in talking to us. So Kiryu just says, well, I guess I'll just have to beat you guys up then. After easily dispatching the men, we arrive at the office and the loan shark seems pretty surprised to see Kiryu. Kiryu asks the president, why did you set me up and what are you after? The president tells Kiryu that he doesn't know anything about a setup. He was just doing what he was told, and that was to tell Kiryu to collect the cash in the back lot. But before he could say anything else, we are interrupted by Kuze. He tells the president, get out, we want a little bit of privacy. We get a tiny bit of backstory on Kiryu and Nishiki. He says that Kiryu and Nishiki are orphans that grew up in Kazuma's orphanage. He then says that he wants Kiryu to spy on Kazuma for him. He says that he needs a piece of information that Kazuma is sitting on, and he wants Kiryu to get it because Kazuma would never suspect it, and if Kiryu does it, he'll guarantee his future in the family. And as a bonus, he'll give us the guy that actually murdered the man. Kiryu then says, so it was you who set me up. Kuze then says, maybe, maybe not. But if you don't accept this offer, you're going to be serving time. He says, the choice is yours, but I want your answer now. Kiryu tells him that you don't know a thing about me, and you sure don't know a thing about Kazuma. Kuze then says, you're going to make an enemy out of me. Are you sure you're ready for what that brings? Kiryu says that he's ready, and if he wasn't, he'd have no business calling himself a Yakuza. So just as we leave, we get a message from an unknown number, to which Kiryu believes that it's Nishiki. Nishiki tells us that he's at the Kazuma family office, so it's time to head there. So as we arrive, we meet a man by the name of Osamu Kashiwagi. He tells us that he essentially knows what's happening, and did Kuze approach us and ask us to sell out Kazuma? Kiryu says yes, then explains what happened. They go on to talk about the lot and how much it's worth. Then Kiryu says that Kazuma has a piece of info that they need so that they can get the lot. Kashiwagi says he doesn't know, and that's the first he's heard of it. He then says you realize the situation that we're in. Not only is Kiryu in trouble, but so is Kazuma. They make it seem like Kiryu killed a civilian, so now they can demand accountability from Kazuma. And that's only the beginning. Kuze will get the lot, he'll become the captain of the Dojima family, and he'll drive Kazuma out of the family entirely. And there's nothing Kazuma can do because he's in prison. Kiryu tells them that he has a plan. He's going to leave the Dojima family, terminate his oath, and retire from the Yakuza. He's not going to ask Kuze, he's going straight to Dojima, and he's ready to do whatever he needs to. So now we're on our way to the headquarters, and unfortunately I lost a lot of footage around this point, but to sum it up very quickly, You arrive at the headquarters, and Kuze is there waiting with some other Yakuza members. You tell Kuze that you want to see Dojima and that you want to be expelled, and he tells you, no, that's not how this is going to go. The only way you're leaving here alive is if you accept my offer. Kiryu says, what, are you just going to kill a family member without the boss's permission? To which Kuze replies, the boss has nothing to do with this now. You just left the family. He then tells the boys, do whatever you like, he's yours. He then looks back at Kiryu and tells him, look, if you do make it up alive, I'll listen to what you have to say. So now it's time to fight our way through the building and make our way up to find Kuze again. So after fighting our way through the building, we find Kuze. Kiryu tells him to talk. He wants to know who's behind the empty lot hit and where is he hiding him. Kuze tells us that you don't screw with the Dojima family and that he's going to end him himself. So now it's time to fight Kuze, and he beat me over and over and over again. But after going to the store and buying some health items, the fight actually becomes pretty easy. So after defeating Kuze, we meet the head of the Dojima family, Sohei Dojima. He says, so I hear you wasted a guy on a collections run. To which Kiryu responds, well, that's what I came here to talk to you about. He says, I swear I didn't kill that man, and he understands that being a suspect brings unwanted attention, so please expel me from the family. So Kuze pipes in saying, I'll take care of this one, he won't make any more trouble for you. To which Dojima responds, oh really? So you're gonna murder a civilian? He says, you decided on your own to let Kiryu out of the family, didn't you? Kuze responds like, no, I didn't do that. Then Awano chimes in and says, you lying to the boss, man? Shibusawa also says, I heard him loud and clear. Kiryu's already left the family, so I don't need the permission to kill him. Awano then brings out what looks like a chopping board and puts it in front of Kuze. And well, Kuze knows what he has to do. So after doing what needs to be done, Kuze stands up and he slowly limps away. Dojima says a lieutenant gave you an answer, so as of today, you are expelled from the family. He then says, but tell me why you go through all of this to get kicked out. Kiryu then says, in order to prove he and Kazuma are innocent. He said the man that died has made a lot of trouble for the family, and that's on him, so he's leaving to take responsibility. So please leave Kazuma out of this. Dojima then says, you admit you screwed up this time, right? He says that your screw up makes it harder for them to get the land, and it was Kazuma that brought you in, so accountability falls on him. He says there's no coming back once you're out of the Yakuza. So we see Kiryu standing in the rain, and he falls down to his knees. I did the exact same thing after I fumbled a bad bit. When out of nowhere a mysterious man asks, can you stand? He says, my name is Tachibana, and he says he's been waiting a long time to meet Kiryu. He then asks, can I have a moment of your time? We then see Tachibana standing in what I can only assume to be a penthouse. We then see Kiryu in the shower after what I can only assume to have been a busy night. Tachibana then tells Kiryu that there's nothing to be worried about, he's a civilian, and that he runs a real estate business in Kamurocho. He goes on to talk about flowers, but he points out a sunflower in particular. He then says, was it Kazuma that named the orphanage Sunflower? He says, you and Nishiki grew up as brothers at the orphanage, as well as two young women. He says that they both regarded Kazuma as their father, and in time followed in his footsteps and joined the Yakuza. But now Kiryu finds himself framed for murder, and Kazuma is facing the risk of expulsion. Kiryu then says that's enough, you've obviously got quite the network, but what he doesn't understand is why and what is he after. He says that there's only one thing any real estate broker wants in this town, and it's the empty lot. He tells us what we already know, and that if one of the Dojima lieutenants gets the lot, Kazuma is obviously gone. But if he can get to it before them, he can protect Kazuma. He says that the reach of his Kamurocho network is considerable. So join me and you can bring the culprit to light. Kiryu obviously has a hard time believing him and asks him, what are you really after? Kiryu says it's too good and too convenient. That's when you have to be careful if you want to survive. Tachibana says that he hopes he reconsiders, and all he asks is that Kiryu takes his card. So after talking to Tachibana, we get home and talk to Nishiki. Kiryu gets him up to date on what's happened. Nishiki says, oh, about that loan shark, he actually turned up dead a few hours ago, and Kiryu pretty much already knows it's Kuze. Kiryu then asks, have you ever heard of Tachibana Real Estate? Nishiki says yes, he does know them, and are they after the empty lot too? He says he's heard little bits here and there, and they are essentially specialists in acquiring properties. He says that any business they set their sights on is shut down in a few days, no matter how successful the place was. Bribes, threats, harassment, they're more Yakuza than the Yakuza. He says that Tachibana's on another level, even Tojo HQ is trying to shut them down, and that should tell you how nasty they are. But if you have them on your side, things get interesting. So after talking to Nishiki, it's time to gather info on Tachibana. But before we can do that, we meet our alternate Bachus, and it's time to learn our third fighting style. After learning B style, we run into two Yakuza members on the street. And one of them says, so you still haven't found the president of Tachibana Real Estate? The other guy says, I'm sorry, this guy is a shadow, he doesn't leave a trace. The informants in this town can tell you anything except when it has to do with Tachibana Real Estate. The other guy responds and essentially says that he's paying the informants to stay quiet. After that, we run into another Yakuza member talking to someone. He says, I think it's pretty clear what I want, it's time to pay your protection money. The owner says, it's not protection money if you don't actually show up when I need you to. He continues with, I'm talking about Tachibana Real Estate when they came and chased me out. He continues with, thanks to you, I had to relocate, and I couldn't even pay you if I wanted to. Kiryu then chimes in and says, you say you opened shop here because Tachibana forced you out your last location. The owner tells Kiryu that he doesn't really know much, and besides, he doesn't really want to deal with those guys again because they're terrifying. He says it's not what they did, they just know everything about me. He goes on to list a few things off, things like his parents' address, his daughter's school, a lot of personal things. Kiryu asks where he can find the guys, and he gives him a location. He says they've driven most of the tenants out, but there's one guy left. We arrive at the building and knock on the door, and a man answers. He asks us a bunch of questions, but Kiryu just says, I want to talk about Tachibana Real Estate. They're trying to get you out of the building, right? The owner says that Tachibana dropped in one day and announced that they owned the whole building and that everyone had to leave. He says that the other tenants bailed the minute they heard the name Tachibana, and he's the only one left. It turns out the owner and his family live inside the bar, and he says that his wife hasn't left the back room for weeks because she's afraid of the homeless guys that have taken over. He says that the homeless guys are on Tachibana bankroll. They get paid to scream, shout, and all kinds of nasty things. All of a sudden there's a knock on the door, and the owner says, that's them, it's Tachibana's guys. Kiryu says let them in, he just wants to talk, and he'll keep the owner safe. A few guys enter the bar, one very handsome one in particular, named Oda. He asks the owner if he's given any thought to relocating yet. The bar owner tells him no, and Oda replies with, well, they are the legal owners of the building. He says that he comes bearing gifts, something from the boss over at the Jinsei family. He says it's the protection money you've paid him to date, 3 years worth at 30 grand a month, rounded up to 2 million, plus another 2 million as a gift from our president. And here's 2 million more, milk money for the baby. He then says, what do you say? Can we call it a deal? Can we expect you to be out within the next few days? The owner says this isn't about the money, it's about the attitude. You think you can mess around with little people's lives however you like. Oda then says, let's drop the false pretenses. Throw as many tantrums as you like, this is all you're getting. Wasting our time with this pathetic act. If it isn't the money, then what is it? Kiryu then steps in and says throwing cash in a father's face in front of his kid. Is that how Tachibana does business? Oda then says, I can see our show of sincerity has Namase on board. He then says, I'll expect a call from you this evening. I look forward to your cooperation. We then see the owner on the floor collecting all the money, to which Kiryu says, so you're just gonna get up and leave? The owner then says, of course, everyone else left the minute they were told to. A little patience and just look at the returns. So after leaving the bar, Kiryu asks one of the homeless guys, hey, where are all your friends? The homeless guy responds, on to the next job, because this one's all done. Kiryu then asks, what kind of outfit is Tachibana Real Estate? The guy then responds, I don't know why you're asking that. You shouldn't mess with them, they're the shadows of this town. They have eyes and ears on every corner. Whoever you are, doesn't matter whether you're Yakuza, they know your secrets. He then says, last I heard, Tojo headquarters made the Jinsei boss hack off one of his fingers. But hey, I never said it was Tachibana who did it. Not that there's anybody else in this town that can dig up that kind of dirt on a Yakuza. He then says, all I can tell you for your own sake is to stay clear of Tachibana. But now we gotta find the other homeless men. We find a couple of guys hanging around a fire, and one of them says something about working for Tachibana Real Estate. Kiryu asks them if they could answer a few questions for him. The homeless guy says, yeah, I don't mind. Wait, actually, no, buy us all around and then we'll talk. So after running around and getting them all a drink, Kiryu then asks them, what work have you done for Tachibana? One of the guys says, you just go wherever they tell you. You camp out, make a nuisance of yourself, it's easy money. Kiryu then asks, do you guys know where the Tachibana Real Estate guys hang out? One of the guys responds and says, yes, it's in a place called Champion District. After talking to the homeless guys, we make our way to the Champion District. We run into some guys hanging out in an alleyway of sorts. Kiryu just tells them, hey listen, I just want some information about Tachibana's guys, are they here? And they kind of just respond with like, yo, we don't really want to tell you anything, we just want to fight. So that's what we do, and we beat them up. One of the guys says, look, I'm not selling Tachibana out to you, and neither will anybody in the neighborhood. Kiryu responds, wait, aren't they trying to chase you out? The other guy responds, no, they're trying to protect us from getting run out by the Yakuza. We then get interrupted by Mr. Handsome. He asks Kiryu, what are you doing sniffing around after us? To which Kiryu responds, well, your boss asked me to partner with him. He says that he's not heard anything about this, so he calls the boss. Oda then says, if you want to know more about us, then you should come by to the place you met the boss last night. So that's what we do. We head over to Tachibana's place and we are greeted by 3 guys in suits. They say that one of our co-workers, Oda, left us very clear instructions. He said that a young thug would come barging in and that we should greet him with a gentle bruising. So it's time to do what we seem to do best and beat up a bunch of guys again. After taking care of those guys downstairs, we head upstairs to the penthouse to find Oda. He tells us essentially, listen, I set those guys on you downstairs to essentially check you out. He says you're obviously pretty good in a fight, but enough to merit Tachibana's recruiting? I don't know about that. But some things you've just got to find out for yourself. So now it's time to fight Oda while he's holding this big, thick metal thing in his hand. This fight was pretty easy, just have some health items to heal you every now and then, and you'll knock it down pretty quick. After the fight, Tachibana appears and Kiryu asks him, did you sign off on having Oda test me like this? To which Tachibana responds, correct. Oda is invaluable to me. I needed his approval before I could let you into our circle. Kiryu then says, isn't it about time we drop the secrecy? Tachibana goes on this deep rant about the city and whatever, and then all of a sudden goes, yo, watch this. He then swipes his hand across the glass, and all the power in the city seems to die out as he's swiping it. Now, I didn't know I was playing a superhero game, but I'm all for it. He then says money is power, and he intends on seeing just how far his power can get him against the Tojo clan. He says, as it stands, I can manage a meager 10 seconds. But by securing the empty lot, he plans to stake his claim among those who control Kamurocho. He says, I don't know how aware you are, but the Tojo clan is far from united. He says he will offer the name of the Tojo member that is his ally in all of this. The man who wishes to see the two of us allied is the Tojo clan's Dojima family captain, Kazuma Shintaro. He goes on to say that the Dojima lieutenant Kuze approached Kiryu to spy on Kazuma and get information out of him about the empty lot. The secret information is the person who can locate the owner of the empty lot, which is Tachibana. He says that they've made far greater progress than the Dojima family. But of course, the minute they learn that, they'll turn their full attention to destroying them. He says that Kazuma knew with considerable certainty that Kuze would set his sights on Kiryu, and that Kiryu would find himself unable to remain in the family. Kiryu then asks, what proof do you have that Kazuma entrusted all of this to you? Tachibana then shows him a watch which has a picture of Kazuma, Nishiki and Kiryu from when they were younger at the orphanage. Kiryu then says that he has no idea what kind of man Kazuma really is, but he's ready to do anything for him, even if it costs him his life. Tachibana then says, in that case, I am pleased to count you as an ally, Kiryu.